April 9, 1945, Flossenburg concentration camp, Bavaria. At dawn, as mist clung to the pine trees beyond the camp fence, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was led from his cell. He had spent the night in prayer. Guards later recalled something that unsettled them more than defiance ever could: Bonhoeffer was calm. Witnesses said he smiled not wide, not theatrical, but quiet, unmistakable just moments before he was hanged. Bonhoeffer was a theologian, not a soldier. He had opposed Hitler openly, helped resistance networks, and paid for it with his life. But what lingered in the memories of those who watched him die was not his words. It was that expression. That faint, peaceful smile on a man who knew exactly what was about to happen. Across the collapsing Third Reich in the final months of World War II, similar accounts appeared again and again. Prisoners facing firing squads. Resistance fighters kneeling in forests. Civilians standing before gallows hastily erected as the Nazi state disintegrated. And among the fear, the shaking hands, the last whispered prayers, there were smiles. Historians long dismissed them as myth, nervous reflex, or shock. But the phenomenon was real, documented in execution records, diaries, and post-war testimonies. And it forces an uncomfortable question: why would anyone smile at the edge of death? To understand it, you have to step into the psychology of a world at war, a world where death was no longer abstract, but scheduled. By 1944, Europe had been saturated with violence for nearly 5 years. Millions were dead. Cities lay in ruins. For soldiers and prisoners alike, the human nervous system was pushed far beyond what it had evolved to endure. Constant fear, starvation, bombardment, loss. In that state, the mind sometimes did something extraordinary to protect itself. Modern neuroscience now offers a partial explanation. In moments of extreme stress, the brain can flood the body with endorphins and dopamine chemicals that dull pain and create a sense of calm or even warmth. It is the same mechanism reported by some soldiers who survived bayonet charges, and by civilians pulled alive from rubble who felt an eerie peace as buildings collapsed around them. But chemistry alone does not explain Bonhoeffer's smile. Or the smile of Sophie Scholl, executed on February 22, 1943, after distributing anti-Nazi leaflets in Munich. Witnesses recalled that she walked to the guillotine upright, composed, and briefly smiled at the guards. She was 21 years old. For people like Scholl and Bonhoeffer, death was not a surprise. It was a conclusion they had already accepted long before the final moment arrived. Psychologically, acceptance can be a powerful release. When fear has nowhere left to go, it sometimes dissolves. There is also something darker and more human at work. In war, identity is often stripped away. You become a number, a uniform, a target. For those about to die, the final seconds can be the first moment in years where choice returns. The choice of posture. The choice of silence. The choice of expression. A smile, in that context, can be an act of defiance, a last declaration of inner freedom when all external freedom is gone. Nazi executioners noted this with unease. In reports from Plötzensee prison in Berlin, guards described condemned prisoners who appeared unnervingly calm. Some smiled. Others thanked their executioners. The regime wanted fear. Smiles undermined the entire theater of terror. And not all smiles were philosophical. Some were the result of dissociation, a psychological defense where the mind disconnects from reality to avoid unbearable pain. Survivors of firing squads who lived by chance later described feeling as if they were watching themselves from a distance, emotionally numb, unreal. In such states, facial expressions can appear serene even as the body is breaking. By the final weeks of the war, as Hitler retreated into his bunker and Germany collapsed around him, executions accelerated. Desperation bred cruelty. But it also bred something else: clarity. Many who smiled before death had already mourned themselves. The terror was spent. What remained was stillness. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler killed himself in Berlin. For millions, the war would end days later. For others, it ended alone, earlier, in prison yards and forest clearings. And for a small, haunting number of them, the last thing the world saw was not fear but a smile. Not because death was kind, but because, at the very end, the war no longer owned them.